The first days of June, AD 193. The grandest palace on earth is going quiet. Guards drift from their posts and do not come back. Slaves slip away through the side doors. In the innermost room, a man of 60 in imperial purple sits alone, listening to the silence spread. 9 weeks ago, he did something no one had done before or since. He bought the Roman Empire. His name was Didius Julianus. And that sentence is not a metaphor. How does an empire end up under the hammer? The throne of the known world went to the highest bidder. Rewind to the last night of a very bad year. The 31st of December, 192. The Emperor Commodus was strangled in his bath by an athlete from his own household. By morning, Rome had a new emperor, Pertinax, a stern old soldier, a freed slave's son who had once kept a school, with an empty treasury and a bodyguard with expensive tastes. The Praetorian Guard, the strongest armed force inside the city, had been promised 12,000 sesterces a man. The ledgers suggest Pertinax paid about half. Remember that number, half. Half bought him 87 days. On the 28th of March, 193, 300 guardsmen, the chroniclers count, pushed into the palace with swords drawn. Nobody stopped them. Pertinax did not run. He walked out to talk 300 creditors back into soldiers. Talking had carried him from a schoolroom to the throne of the world. This time, the words ran out. His own prefect melted away, or worse, the sources never settle it. A blade ended the argument. By afternoon, the guard held an empty throne. And an empty throne is inventory. Then the Praetorians did the thing Rome never forgave. From their fortress walls, they announced that the empire was for sale. It was not a mutiny anymore. It was a market. One buyer was already inside. Sulpicius, prefect of the city, Pertinax's own father-in-law, sent in to calm the mutiny, stayed to bid for the throne over his son-in-law's corpse. Across the city, Herodion tells it, Julianus was deep in the wine at dinner when his wife and daughter pulled him off the couch. The empire is on the market, and someone else is bidding. The gates stayed shut, so the old senator stood in the road shouting offers up at the wall. This is not legend. A senator named Cassius Dio was living in Rome and wrote down what his city did.
Just as if it had been in some market or auction room, both the city and its entire empire were auctioned off.
2 bidders, one inside the walls, one outside, soldiers running figures between them like auction clerks in armor. The price of a guardsman's loyalty climbed to 20,000 sesterces a man, Sulpicius's ceiling. The next shout would decide who owned the world. Julianus did not inch. Dio says he jumped the bid by 5,000 at a stroke, shouting the number, spreading the fingers of one hand against the torchlight so the wall could count it. 25,000 sesterces per guardsman, 250 gold pieces a man, 20 years of a legionary's pay, double the promise Pertinax was murdered for half-keeping. Per man, thousands of men. On a shouted word, then the whisper, crown the dead man's father-in-law, and someday an accounting. Dio says Julianus planted that fear himself. The wall went silent. Then the soldiers lowered a ladder. Herodion tells it. They hauled the next master of the Roman world up over the parapet like contraband, gates barred until the price was settled. Sold one afternoon, the loser walked out of the camp alive. Hold that thought. By nightfall, Julianus crossed Rome behind a forest of Praetorian standards, and armed men ringed the Senate house while the senators voted him emperor at spear point. Dio sat in that room. He knew Julianus from the courts and loathed him, and his disgust is still readable 18 centuries later. The reign began that night. It had 66 days in it. The sale should have closed there, the Senate's seal, the purple on his shoulders. Instead, Rome refused to be merchandise. Crowds cursed him to his face, stealer of the empire. Tens of thousands packed the Circus Maximus, chanting for a distant governor, Pacen eus nyiger in Syria, to come take the throne back. Julianus owned the palace. He never owned the city. Here, the story stops being a sale and becomes a repossession. 12 days in, at a Danube fortress called Kar Nun Tum, the border legions proclaimed their own emperor, Septim Eos Severus, hard, methodical, 800 miles out, with the best army in the empire. 54 days left. A third governor stirred in Britain until Severus bought his patience with a title. 3 men had ruled the auction invalid, and the nearest started marching, sleeping in armor among his men. Herodion says, almost as fast as the news of him. In Rome, the buyer was discovering what his money had bought. The Praetorians, soft from parade duty, grumbled at digging defenses. Dio watched war elephants drilled on the field of Mars, unused to their towers, pitching turrets and riders into the dust. The defense of the capital was a farce. Then the Senate was made to offer Severus half the throne, co-emperor, free of charge, from the man who had paid full price. Severus did not slow down. Taking Rome should have cost him a war. Instead, it cost him a letter, addressed past the Senate, past the emperor, to the Praetorian Guard itself. Hand over Pertinax's actual killers, stand down and be spared. The guard read it, looked north, and did the arithmetic they were best at. They seized Pertinax's killers and declared for Severus. The soldiers who had sold Julianus an empire now sold him out. This time, nobody had to bid. The Senate followed. The men who crowned him at spear point voted him dead while he still sat in the palace, decreed Severus emperor, and made murdered Pertinax a god. Which brings us back to June. The palace emptied like a tide going out. Guards first, then slaves, one old man in the largest residence on earth, listening. 66 days after the auction, a soldier found him, and Dio recorded the last thing he said.
But what evil have I done? Whom have I killed?
No one. He had been consul, governor of province after province, raised, the old biographies claim, in the household of Marcus Aurelius's own mother. None of it weighed an ounce against the buying. He had reigned 66 days and ruled none of them. His wife and daughter, empresses for 9 weeks, carried him to his great-grandfather's tomb on the Via Labicana. 2 women and a borrowed grave. Severus entered Rome days later. His first business, the cellars. He summoned the guard to a parade, unarmed, in ceremonial dress, carrying laurel branches. They came expecting a bonus. At a signal, his Danube legionaries closed a ring of spears around them. Herodion gives Severus the words. You murdered the emperor you were sworn to protect, and sold the empire for silver, as if it were your own property. He did not massacre the sellers. He closed the shop, belts cut, rank erased, banished. Any former guardsman found within 100 miles of Rome would answer with his head. The guard that auctioned an empire walked out of history in its underclothes, still holding laurel. And the losing bidder, Sulpici Arnus, survived it all, for 4 years. Then he backed the wrong side in Severus's civil wars, and it cost him his head. Even the runner-up paid. So, what evil had he done? It was a fair question. Julianus murdered no one. The men who strangled Commodus, the guards who cut down Pertinax, the general who took the throne behind an army, every hand was bloodier than his. His crime was the receipt. Rome forgave blood on the purple for 2 centuries. What it could not forgive was proof, in a single honest afternoon, that the throne of the world was merchandise. The guard sold the empire, Severus repossessed it. Didius Julianus is remembered as the man who bought Rome. He was also the only one who paid. 1 strangled emperor, 1 half-kept promise, 300 swords in a palace, 2 bidders at a wall, 5 fingers spread against the torchlight, a ladder over a parapet, 1 letter from the north, an empty palace, and an old man's question, and the most powerful empire on earth sold in an afternoon to the only man in Rome who believed a bought throne would stay bought. This has been the drawn past.